because it is 7:35. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I just wanted to let everyone know before we get started that this session is being recorded, just to everyone to keep that in mind. I also wanted to encourage people to turn on their cameras if they're able to, just because it makes for a more engaging discussion, especially at the end during the Q&A session. But obviously, sometimes there are Wi-Fi issues, and we understand that. And then the last thing I just wanted to remind you is that this is our first talk in two sort of Earth Day related series. So there is going to be another talk next week about media and journalism and climate change rhetoric in the media. So if you're interested in that, you should definitely stop by as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Ben and Lon. Thank you so much, our alumni speakers.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to go first with a quick bio. I'm Lon. Thanks so much for having me. I love my time at Oberlin, and so I'm really just so happy to kind of engage with the community again. So I work in renewable energy finance, basically connecting projects with capital. I work within a very specific subset of tax finance, which is tax equity finance. So what this means is sort of like qualifying renewable energy projects generate a tax credit that asset owners can then use to offset their tax liability. And, basically this is a way to get private dollars into specific sectors and industries that kind of Congress deems important. And there are actually a bunch of different types of investment tax credits, not just renewable energy. So there's like low-income housing tax credits, there is historic preservation tax credits, there are new market tax credits, which is sort of like operating businesses in low-income census tracts. But anyway, it's sort of like this community development lens that I come at a lot of the investing. And in my current role, I work on behalf of corporates, banks, to source, negotiate, and then manage these projects. So that means I go out and I find projects, I present them to investors, talking about all the different benefits that they receive, not just financial, but environmental. And then I go through the process of negotiating the documents, managing the model, financial model that's related to it. I diligence the project, so that's understanding like how they work, what kind of technology they're using, and all of the related contracts. So the construction contract and the power purchase agreement and all of those sorts of things. And so then ultimately, once the deal is closed, I manage the investment through kind of its life cycle. So I guess the question is, how did I get here from Oberlin? And so after Oberlin, I actually went to Portland. I was a pastry chef. I was a photographer for a local paper. I did nothing energy related. I was just happy to be out of school. And so then, after a couple of years of that, I decided to go back to law school. And I came back here to St. Louis, and I was near my parents. Fast forward 3 years, I graduated, passed the bar. But it was 2009 and there were no jobs, especially not for lawyers. And so I did the next best thing, which was become a barista. And so I made a lot of coffee drinks. But I was incredibly fortunate that the coffee shop that I worked in was across the street from US Bank and their subsidiary called the Community Development Corporation, which really was their tax credit investing platform group. And I had kind of ultimately built up the gumption to pass along my resume with a cup of coffee to someone who ended up being the CFO of the organization and got interviews and got a job. It was sort of lucky. I spent just 12 years at the bank doing like all different types of roles. I did asset management, I did underwriting. I ultimately ran a team of people who closed deals. And then just about a year ago, I left to join a smaller company where I'm in more of an advisory role, but I do a lot more tax credits, but I'm still in tax credits. So then I guess in addition to my day job, I'll just mention, I sit on two national boards. I sit on RISE, which stands for Women of Renewable Industries and Sustainable Energy. It's a national nonprofit, and the goal, our mission is really to support all women in the industry to kind of succeed and grow and develop their careers. And we do all different types of things, from fellowships to webinars. We have a leadership forum every year. And recently we've really been trying to help corporates figure out how they can actually have meaningful DEI in their corporate boardrooms to support women and let their voices be heard. The other board that I sit on is for National Impact Fund for North Sky Capital. And this fund is actually really focused on disadvantaged businesses and communities that lack access to kind of traditional capital. And so they focus on businesses that have positive environmental impacts. So think like clean tech, renewable energy, obviously, sustainable food production, things like that. But the key to their mission is really creating quality, well-paying jobs that are accessible, especially to people within those low-income communities. I think those are my 7 minutes. Sorry, Ben. I will pass it over to you to do your bio.
Great. Thanks, Lon. No, I don't think you went over. I think you were good. Okay. So yeah. My name is Ben Fram, also a proud Oberlin alum. I graduated in 2010. Also went to a dismal job market. I was in environmental studies and economics double major. I started off as a chemistry and environmental studies double major, but after analytical chemistry, I threw in the towel and quit. I hate to say it, but fortunately, economics was there to. I thought the math was too hard, and I think in chemistry, and then I went into economics where the math is a lot harder. So I don't know what I was thinking, but anyway, it turned out okay. I graduated, and I was really lucky to actually land a job working for the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities, which is the Public Utilities Commission in the state of New Jersey. They regulate everything from power, natural gas, also to cable and water, so any utility basically. And I was working basically on energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. So under the American Reinvestment Recovery Act, ARA, under the Obama administration, each state was given billions of dollars basically to improve municipal buildings and kind of engage in some, flagship renewable energy projects. So it was great. I got a very, very wide exposure to anything from lighting efficiency, HVAC systems, shell measures, solar, and energy management systems. So it was great. I got a really, really solid education there. And after that, I decided to go get a master's degree, as OBs tend to do. And I had always wanted to live in Scandinavia. I studied abroad in Copenhagen, so I applied to schools in Sweden. I got into the University of Gothenburg, their economics program there, and I spent 2 years. I basically, kind of sharpened my analytical skills in economics and stayed focused on the energy sector. So I specialized kind of in energy economics and studied econometrics, which is, those of you who don't know, which is kind of the subfield of economics that tries to find relationships between economic variables, prices, demand, and anything under the sun. So a lot of statistics. So really like that. And then I graduated in 2014 and was kind of homesick for good old East Coast. And I managed to get a job, really, really awesome job. Very lucky to work for Monitoring Analytics, which is the economic analysis. Basically, they're a consulting firm, kind of very specialized, and they are the market monitor for PJM. So PJM is the wholesale, the largest wholesale market in the United States, wholesale power market. It's kind of the biggest and baddest, most complex, spans basically from just south of New York City down to North Carolina, all the way out to Chicago. So about 65 million end users. And I got a phenomenal education there, was kind of working as a power market analyst, crunching a lot of numbers, looking at a lot of market outcomes. We were part of our role was looking to see how market participants behave, making sure people are behaving competitively, or if not, then trying to recommend rule changes so that people do behave competitively. That's a whole long saga, but it was extremely exciting and very educational experience. And most of the people that I worked with had gotten PhDs. A lot of people PhDs in economics, and other people with things like applied math and operations research, which is a subfield of math that's focused on optimization. And so I decided to apply for PhD programs. And I got into a program in Norway that basically was a good match between my study interests in the energy sector. And I've been here since 2017, pursuing a PhD, and I have been singularly focused on I focus mostly on electricity markets, but I do also focus a bit on natural gas markets, which have become extraordinarily important, at least in the United States, since the shale gas revolution back about 10 years ago. And yeah, that's basically where I am now. So I just got a job like a week ago. So thank you. Yeah, I'll be working for a green energy consulting company here in Bergen, Norway, that focuses on they're focused mostly on renewables, and they have a very heavy focus on hydrogen, which is interesting. Very much, I would still say, experimental from the commercially viable side of things. But that'll be a lot of fun to learn more about how that industry works. So that's it for me.
Awesome. So Ben and I put together a couple questions. We were really fortunate that we were able to have some time to chat before this webinar. And I think one of the things that we both talked a lot about was kind of when you're talking to people about renewable energy and energy markets, it is actually very complicated to, the markets aren't similar, they're all totally different. So sometimes it can be a challenge when you're talking to people to kind of get on the same page about, even just how to read your energy bill. That can be a little bit complicated. So Ben, what do you think is like one thing that's really important for people to understand about renewables and about energy markets as we're getting into these conversations?
Yep, thanks, Lana. Great question. Yeah, so I'm gonna kind of answer from the power side, because that's kind of my forte. I think the most important thing, the overarching theme, kind of at least if you get into the electricity side of the energy business, which I encourage you all to do because it's really fun, very dynamic, and there's always lots to learn, is that the markets are ultimately, at the end of the day, they are governed by the system physics. So electricity is kind of a unique good in a lot of ways. And yeah, I think one of the important things to understand about the way that the markets work is that, if you have a kind of an economics background, there's a lot of talk about supply and demand, and how, prices are the intersection of those two curves. And you talk about sort of supply and demand imbalances, or, where the curves are moving and you're getting to equilibria. In electricity markets, because of the way AC power works, supply must always equal demand without any exceptions. And you have dispatchers and people working to constantly balance the flow of power so that consumption is equal to production, essentially. You have all kinds of machinery that's actually that's synchronized at exactly the same frequency, 60 hertz in the US. So that frequency is crucial for the power grid to operate. So, when people kind of push back and say, oh, well, we can't power the grid entirely with intermittent resources like wind and solar. Sometimes what they're really referring to is kind of the challenges that the grid operator actually has with balancing the production from those sorts of resources. So, storage will be a solution eventually, but I think that's probably further out than people think. But yeah, anyway, that's kind of a crucial thing to understand and keep in mind, at least when you're talking about electricity markets, is this very, very fundamental, important kind of supply and demand balance that has to always be upheld.
Yeah, no, exactly. And right, so when you think about renewables in particular, right, like solar and wind, you're only producing energy when the sun is shining or when the wind is blowing. And so if somebody's not there to use it, it makes it difficult as part of your energy mix. So I think that leads me into my next question here, Ben. Can you explain what the duck curve is and sort of the challenges and opportunity it affords us in renewable energy?
Yes, I have I'm gonna share my screen real fast. Let's see.
Sure.
Let me find the right cat. Yeah. So the infamous duck curve. This is a great picture of the duck curve. Here we go. Oh, come on. Can you guys see this? Oh, but there's an ad here. Sorry, I'll just use the Google. Okay, I'll just share my screen here. So the duck curve is essentially, well, I get this teed up. The duck curve is it's what it's actually referring to as the low duration curve in areas where you have very high solar penetration. And essentially, here we go. Can you guys see this? Yeah, this one over here. So this is a time series here. On the y-axis you have the hour of the day, and here you have the basically this is the load of the system, so the demand for power. And the duck curve basically, so as more solar has kind of come into the market, especially in places like California, you basically get this very pronounced dip in the middle of the day when the sun is shining, and that is really decreasing the load. It's decreasing the demand for power because it's being offset by all this excess production of solar. And the problem is that you can see they're talking about this increased ramp here, is that when the sun sets, basically it's happening at about the same time at about 5 p.m. when people are coming home, which is usually what we refer to as peak load, when the demand for power is highest. And ramping can be a difficult thing for certain sorts of fuel types or generator types. So if you're in a market that has a lot of flexible generation like hydro or gas to a certain extent, then those units can ramp up very quickly, because remember, the load has to always be balanced with production. But if you're in a market where you might have a lot of coal or nuclear, which is notoriously inflexible, and suddenly basically all of your solar is sort of subsiding while the demand is increasing at the same time, you get these really violent kind of ramps that you have to have. We call it ramp basically in the industry, and that can cause price spikes. It can put a lot of excess wear and tear on units, depending on what sort of technology it is. So the duck curve is kind of a good thing in a certain way, or it's an artifact or a result basically of kind of the changing generation mix. It looks more like a duck every year, I guess, as the solar penetration increases in places like California.
So I guess I'll stop. Does anybody have kind of questions on this, or sort of what we've talked about so far, just on energy markets and maybe the duck curve here? Have you all heard of this? Do you all know of this already?
So like in California right now, we're actually fighting for our net metering rights.
Nice.
And it's getting rough because they don't want any exported energy, and so trying to devalue that. But they won't let us export the battery energy.
They won't let you export battery energy?
So like I'm in commercial side, and so we've got these gigantic batteries, but all they're allowed to do is offset the business's load. And so if the business shuts down at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, then they're not allowed to continue to produce or like send energy back to the grid and spin that meter backwards.
That's interesting.
And so we've got megawatts just sitting there doing nothing every night.
But you don't have a wholesale market agreement though, do you? This is just retail? or behind the meter, quote unquote.
Correct. Yeah, it's all behind the meter.
Yeah, I think FERC just actually, I know that's been a challenge. So for people who don't know, so at the high voltage level, basically where the markets sort of operate, you basically usually have utility scale resources that are on the scale of megawatts, which is 1,000 kilowatts. So you have large units, and you need a wholesale market participation agreement to kind of play in the markets to participate. But if you're what's called a DER, a distributed energy resource, which is usually smaller scale, like residential solar or like a battery, then sometimes then you can't bid into the wholesale markets, and you have to abide by the retail behind the meter rules. But and there's been a lot of issues in getting those resources kind of more hooked into the market, getting them compensated properly. I think FERC just came out with a ruling that's going to make it easier for DERs to participate. But yeah, this has been a hot topic for a while. So
Was the original use case for this storage peak shavings? Is that why it was installed?
Yes. Peak shaving, demand management, but it's because there are programs like there are various SCE programs that they've got for lowering stuff, but right now I think the virtual power plants is going to be the biggest impact to the grid balancing.
Cool. The arc of justice bends slowly, but hopefully it will.
And in California.
Yeah, well, California has. Yeah, I won't get into it. California is not perfect. Their market's not perfect, and lots of imports from neighboring Arizona and Nevada are not exactly kind of clean and green energy. It's a lot of coal that's going into California. So, but they're trying. A lot of people, and it's a load pocket. You have a lot of demand, and it's difficult to kind of transition your power system into a fully clean system overnight, which overnight means a decade. So they're doing their best, but it's hard. So I'm going to stop sharing. So anyway. Yeah, okay. Lon, so I'm going to ask Lon a few questions now. Yeah, we talked about this when we were able to chat offline a bit, but Lon, could you talk a little bit about energy equity, kind of what that means from your perspective as somebody who works professionally in the field, and maybe talk about community solar as an example of how that's addressing issues of equity in the energy sector?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a start, right? So when I think of energy equity, it's sort of the concept that disadvantaged communities have been historically marginalized because they've been overburdened by pollution. They have had underinvestment in clean infrastructure. They lack access to maybe energy efficient housing or transportation. And so I mean, it's not the end all be all, but it is an avenue, and I think it has a lot of possibilities to get better, is community solar. And that's, I mean, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a shared local solar facility, which community members can buy power from. And this is typically called like a subscription. So you subscribe to a certain percentage of the generation of the asset. And so when you think about it, right, like people and businesses that rent or live in like multi-tenant housing or have roofs that can't support solar, they really can't access solar through kind of traditional residential or behind the meter models. And so community solar opens it up. It kind of is one way to address and expand solar for all. So there are different programs in different states. In certain regions, there's actually specific requirements that a certain percentage of the subscribers are low to moderate income, which I think really forces the issue around equity and forces the issue around access for people that are low income. but I mean, it's by no means perfect. I think there are other models of community solar. So when I talk about community solar, I'm thinking it is owned by an asset owner, and then, you know, then it's net metered out to consumers. There are, you know, kind of like more like microgrids where many members can actually own the community solar itself and then distribute how they see fit. But that's really uncommon, I think, just because ultimately the financing is in their tax credit are such a huge driver for renewable energy that I mean, when it's 30% of your capital stack, if you don't have that, or you can't monetize the tax credits yourself, which most residents or, you know, your average person can't, certainly not to the size and degree that the costs are on these kinds of solar projects. Anyway, that's a quick and dirty. I don't know if there are questions.
Actually gonna, if you could expand, is it typical for, are there still these sorts of arrangements where private homeowners basically will lease their houses out to companies that own the panels, or is it more?
It's usually smaller unused land. Sometimes it's unused farmland. A lot of times in the Northeast, particularly like Massachusetts has a really excellent state program called Massachusetts Smart, and you actually get adders for your PPA if it's on like a landfill or a brownfield site. There are tons of landfills obviously in the Northeast, and so these typically go completely unused. They're, you know, capped landfills. You can't really build on them because you can't puncture the landfill. And so solar is a really great way to use that land, because nobody else is going to use it otherwise. So yeah, it's usually like land out there that then connects into the utility territory. So the subscribers have to be within the utility territory.
Cool. And a PPA, for anybody who was wondering, is a power purchasing agreement. Yeah. So that is a contract between the generator, whatever's producing the power, and the consumers, basically, or typically.
Yeah. Right. And most of them are net metering. So you're actually buying from your utility. You're kind of getting credit for the green energy.
Awesome. And so, you know, from your vantage point, you know, what do you think are some of the more exciting and kind of innovative developments that are sort of emerging over the horizon in the energy industry as we?
I mean, so like finance in particular, I have to say I'm really excited. The SEC released a new rule. Well, it's a proposal for a rule for required disclosures in your financial statements that talk to climate risk. So any public company has to put this in their financials, and then they have to also talk about how much greenhouse gas emissions that they have. And I think this is huge because up until now, all of these disclosures have been kind of voluntary, and you've seen like huge swaths of companies and their like impact reports and their ESG reports, and they're all of these like super glossy, beautiful like charts and graphs, colors, and like, look at all of this money that we're putting into green energy and like whatever else they are doing. And they're not talking about the other side of like how much money that they're putting into, how much they're lending to new coal facilities, or, you know, things along that nature, or are they investing in coastal lines that have huge risks related to them for flooding? And, you know, so the talk has been in the finance community that, yes, like this is a real risk that we're not actually accounting for. I mean, anybody reads any Bloomberg, I think you would like, this is a big issue for him. He was on the task force that develops a lot of these rules. So this rule then from the SEC would really force the connection between the climate risk and your actual financials. You would have to disclose it. You would have to put footnotes with all along all the numbers in your balance sheet and income statement. I think the threshold is like 1% that's impacted by these climate risks, so that investors and everybody has a better understanding of what real long-term risks your company holds. Anyway, that it's still in the comment period. At the end of next month, hopefully they'll settle down. I mean, the rules that they came out with were actually very bullish. So I was very excited to see how strong a lot of the disclosure requirements were. I'm sure they'll be cut back. Of course, anti-regulation and every fossil fuel lobby is out there pushing against it. But I'm hopeful. I mean, I think there's something is actually going to pass, and we'll see some real movement on this, which will be exciting. And no more of that ESG washing, which I hate. The other thing that I'll mention that I think is exciting is, Build Back Better. I think everybody's talked about it. It's kind of DOA at this point. But there was a lot of talk about maybe a skinny Build Back or a skinny climate piece that's going to come down with it. And I'm not going to go through all of the different pieces of it, but one thing that I think is particularly interesting and unique about Build Back Better that I haven't seen in federal regulation before is that, especially for like the tax credit and then also additional other kinds of tax credits, they're putting requirements on that for job creation, focusing on low-income communities. I mean, I think there's like a real connection between, there's a real effort to kind of bring everybody along in the clean, green economy. And that is a different conversation that I've heard from the past, where it's always been like, well, environmental work is good in and of itself. And, we're doing something good for the environment, which is 100% true. But I think in terms of empowering everybody in this world and bringing everybody along in the clean, green economy, not just, white dudes, like we have to focus on this, and we have to kind of force it in our legislation. And I was really excited to see that. So we'll see if it passes, but at least it's in the conversation. I put it that way.
Thank you both for your comments. I'm just going to jump in because I wanted to open up the floor to, I know you've been offering comments and questions throughout, but I wanted to sort of formally open up the floor to any questions or comments that you have for our two speakers. Feel free to just raise your hand, unmute yourself, or if you'd rather, feel free to put a comment in the chat. If you don't want it to be public, you can also just send it privately to me, and I can read it as an anonymous question. So yeah, with that, whoever would like to speak.
Especially students, you guys don't ask questions. You guys get first dibs.
Yeah, I think this is like the most intimate webinar I've ever done. So it'd be great to hear from people.
Will be nice. Is anybody actively looking for a job right now? Claire, yeah. What specifically? Do you have an idea what specifically you're looking for?
No, it probably won't be in the renewable energy sector, but it might have something to do with energy. I'm probably looking in the nonprofit sector to do something with sustainability.
Okay. Cool. Is anybody looking for a job in the energy business?
I mean, maybe people are too shy to say anything, but I guess I wanted to know, like, if someone here is looking for a job in the renewable energy sector, do either of you have any advice for them, like good places to look? Yeah.
Sure. You want to go first, Lauren, or you need to go first?
Sure. No, you go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I guess in contrast to when I graduated, and I guess when you graduated too, Lon, which is absolutely abysmal. I mean, I have to say, I think the year I graduated was the worst year on record, since the Great Depression. It was abysmal in 2009, 2010. So anyway, that is just to say that I think the job market is much stronger nowadays, which is great. I mean, a lot of companies are looking for talented people who are willing to learn and to have the skill set to contribute. So at the very least, I think you can kind of go into this job market, if you happen to be going into the job market now, with a lot more confidence that you'll find something, because when I was coming out, it was kind of just doom, gloom, despair, and destitution. So, at the very least, I would encourage you to be confident that you'll find something. It might take a few months, it might not happen overnight, but it's a very strong job market at the moment. So that's something at least to be happy about.
Yeah, I would say, like, be open-minded. I think, like, there are so many, like, every company you can think of is trying to get into renewables, into sustainability. Like, it is big business, aside from, I probably tell I'm a little annoyed with all the ESG shit, but from small nonprofits to government to Google and Apple, like, they are buying tons and tons and tons of power. They have these enormous data centers. They have so much load. They're buying RECs, or renewable energy credits, to offset their carbon footprint. Like, everybody is working in this space, I think, and there's so much exciting stuff going on, even beyond energy. And so I think the key is maybe be open-minded of where you look and what kind of jobs you would be interested in taking, because you can learn so much in so many different places. I think the other piece of it is, like, I don't know that there's, like, I don't think no offense, Ben, but I don't think you have to be an economist to work in finance. Like, I'm a history major. I didn't know what a balance sheet was.
You definitely don't have to be an economist to work in finance.
Like,
in fact, maybe you shouldn't be an economist to work in finance.
Yeah. I had no idea what a balance sheet was. I knew nothing when I started at the bank. But I think, like, if you're smart and you're hardworking and you're interested, like, that's really the key. Be interested in the things that are going on, and be curious, and ask questions. And I think that will get you farther wherever you go. And you can find your own path, because there's no path to take, right? There's no, like, if you do steps A, B, C, and D, you're going to find yourself in Ben's shoes or my shoes or wherever. I think you kind of have to know what you like doing and know yourself and do that, rather than trying to, like, pick where you want to go and go there. It's a meandering path.
Another thing I just wanted to say too is this. Maybe this is a bit of a controversial opinion, and it may depend on the industry. But I also 9 times out of 10 encourage people to work first before pursuing any sort of graduate degree. I know that helped me a lot. That really, it's been invaluable even during my PhD. I mean, I have a very, very good bullshit meter. I can see what projects are viable, what aren't, right off the bat. It's really helped me improve my research a lot, read other people's papers, know who's good to work with, who isn't good to work with. So, even if you want to be an academic, I guess go into academia, work experience can be really, really invaluable. But I would say if you're going to go for a master's degree or anything else, having some work experience, 2 years, 2 to 3 years is going to pay off, incredible dividends. That's just my personal opinion, but not sure how you feel about that, Lon, but we both did that. We both did that sort of, right?
In any kind of work. I mean, like, obviously a barista, but just, like, getting out and talking to people and, following directions. Not that you don't do that in school, but I think it's nice to be able to interact with other people, different ages, and learn different styles. So that's hard. People work really differently, and you don't really realize that until you're out there working with different people. Yeah,
and I really like the way how you emphasize kind of learning, because I also, I think a really good way to look at a job, I think at any point in your career, honestly, is as a learning experience. I mean, of course, you're going to be contributing to a company or some sort of employer, but you want to be getting something out of it as well beyond just kind of, the monetary stuff. So, if you're in a fortunate enough situation to kind of have multiple job offers, obviously there's going to be lots of things that you want to take into consideration, but I wouldn't sleep on kind of considering, okay, how much am I going to learn? How much knowledge am I going to acquire from this job? Even just 3 years spent at my previous job was just, it was insane how much I learned. And maybe it's a little cliche or corny to say it, but I would really look at a job as kind of a learning experience, and try to work with really smart people who are engaged and will kind of show you the ropes. And before you know it, you'll be up the learning curve in no time, and your confidence will just increase exponentially. So it's a good thing to keep in mind too when looking for jobs.
In retrospect, what do you guys see as the most valuable things you did at Oberlin, and what do you wish you'd done that you could communicate to our students today?
Lon, you want to go first, or you want me to go first?
About that one. You
Okay. Yeah. Well, no, at Oberlin, I obviously got a great education. Like I said, I was in environmental studies and economics double major with a minor in chemistry, so I got a good kind of breadth of courses. I think the one skill that I really got the most out of at Oberlin is Oberlin is sort of where I actually learned how to write properly. I think I came in from high school and I'm a horrible writer. I think I really got an excellent education in writing. Took lots of courses that required me to write properly. So I think that's one of the best things I got out of it. But yeah, I mean, got a great education from the environmental studies department. I got a really strong background in environmental economics. You sort of take for granted how strong the environmental studies focus at Oberlin is. So that was great, especially since it sort of forces you to get different perspectives about the scientific end of things. Environmental chemistry with Professor Elrod was fantastic. Professor Peterson's course in systems modeling was really excellent. I took a few courses with Professor Shaman. He was fantastic. So yeah, I mean, the one thing I wish I had done more was study harder. I really, I mean, I did not have the study skills. I think I really needed to be an A student. I think I was a B+ student at Oberlin and did well in some courses and not as good in others. But yeah, I did fine. I got a job. So, but I wish that I had been more mature and had developed more of the study skills. And I think I kind of hit that more in graduate school, kind of hit my academic stride. So anyway, my confessions.
So what I took most from Oberlin is like really being interested in stuff and learning how to scratch that itch, so to say. Like if there was a particular topic that I thought was interesting, obviously at Oberlin you can indulge even the most like niche issue that you can possibly think of. That was great for your honors projects and things like that. And so like you built the skill on how to ask questions and how to further your depth of understanding of a particular issue, and then kind of put it all together in sort of some meaningful story, or like make meaning out of it as a piece apart from yourself, I guess. And so being able to do that, I think, is really important, because that's for me what continues to sustain me. Like when in my job, like I love learning about new stuff. Like when battery storage technology came out, it was like my obsession for a year, 2 years, and I would spend hours on calls with IEs. I would go to SPI and I would go around to all the different booths and talk about the different cell chemistry. And I am not into chemistry or anything like that, but just being able to like get down to the minutia and really understand how things were built and put together, that was probably the best takeaway that I had from Oberlin, of feeding that desire and that interest. And as for what I wish I had done more of, is I wish this is gonna sound silly, I wish I had kept some of my syllabi. I've actually gone on more recently to look for classes that I had taken, because I took Professor Hogan's Russian history class, and with all the, this war, there was a particular book that I was really interested in about Stalinism, and I can't find it. And of course I can't find the syllabi. And I was like searching on the Oberlin's like history syllabus, which isn't really there. But anyway, keep those syllabi, remember those books, like just take a picture of them and keep them in your folder somewhere so you can go back and be like, oh yes, this is, I'd probably go back and find that like it wasn't as helpful as I remembered it, but still the ability to go back, I wish I had.
I have a question that was sent to me anonymously. So it was mentioned that sometimes you have like a lot of solar energy at times when there's not a ton of demand for it. So what are some ways that solar energy is currently being stored right now? Like what are in the development of storage for solar energy? And then also what professions oversee storage or are involved in that?
Yeah, so I mean, as Lon said earlier, which is a really good point. I mean, different markets have very different fuel mixes. So, California, I suppose, is probably the most extreme, since they've been really proactive with developing lots of solar resources. And I think they're trying to develop. Lon probably actually knows more than I do. I can speak for PJM and kind of the Mid-Atlantic region. There's and the Midwest. I mean, in most of the kind of some of the big markets, solar's not really a factor just yet. You just don't really have very consistent sun. I mean, it's a factor, but it only accounts for, maximum, I think, 1% of the generation mix in large swaths of the country. Places like California, it's more, but I guess the answer I'm trying to get at is it's not really an issue at the moment in large swaths of the country with kind of this oversupply, so to speak, of solar. There's been a lot more wind in areas like in the upper Midwest and PJM. That has grown very, very aggressively. But so storage is it's very much an industry that's sort of in its nascent development. I mean, we've had the technology for batteries and galvanic cells for hundreds of years, but it's been a very steep learning curve to actually scale these sorts of things up to the utility scale, where we're talking about megawatts and making it cost competitive. And one of my papers is talking about storage resource profitability. Where you're trying to basically arbitrage energy prices. You're trying to buy low and sell high, and yeah, with the capital costs now, it's still expensive. But in the next 5-10 years, as those costs come down, you'll probably see a lot more of it in certain states. I think New York State has I think they want 1,000 megawatts, a gigawatt of storage in the next decade. Is that right, Lon? New York?
I think that's right. It's a lot.
Yeah. New York is moving pretty aggressively into storage, but subsidies. Yeah, that's always another hot topic in these markets. But my personal opinion, not my professional opinion necessarily, but personally, sometimes you do need subsidies or kind of preferential treatment to actually get some of these more quote unquote untested or nascent technologies off the ground. It looks like New York is going to try to do that, and I'm sure California and some of the other more Western states are going to do the same. So that was kind of a rant. but I hope that was at least somewhat clarifying.
So I would say just like I think the first question was like, what kind of tech? It's mostly lithium ion. Like it's
Yeah, it's
like what's in your phone, what's on your computer. Like it's lithium ion batteries. There are flow batteries that I've heard more uptake on. They have bigger capacity from what I understand. But it's just like a giant vat of electric chemicals. And so people are less inclined to invest in it because it sounds more dangerous. But I think, we've been talking, I feel like I have in the finance world been talking about battery storage coming online for like 5-7 years now. And it's like the next thing, And like, I think one of the biggest challenges for storage is actually the use case. Who is going to pay for the usage of that storage and when? And, there are so many different use cases. Like we kind of talked a little bit here, and with Alex, like you can do peak shavings, which is like, you discharge your battery a little bit as you're trying to like not pay so much when the price of power is really high. There is demand shift too. So like when people are using it and when you are using it, but all of these use cases tend to do better with different kinds of chemistries, right? And so that means like some chemistries are really good at like charging up really fast and then discharging really fast. Some of them are good at like charging and holding and then petering out. And so I think until we figure out like what the best use case is and who's actually going to be wanting to pay for that, because ultimately when you're trying to get something financed, you need a regular stream of income related to that asset for the money to come, right? Like nobody's going to help you build your storage plant if you don't have a buyer, right? Like it's just not, nobody's gonna give you money for that because they're like, well, how do I get my return? Where's the money coming for my return? So that's the quick bit on the storage piece. And then in terms of where you want to work, I think that there are a couple interesting places. Obviously any independent engineer, like, I think of like the big ones like DNV and Black and Veatch, like they have like deep benches when it comes to storage. You don't have to, and again, you don't have to be an engineer to work for them. I think they have all different types of roles for people like you, like writing. There are people that literally coordinate reports for an investor or for a buyer, and they'll sit and they'll talk to all the different experts. They'll talk to the chemistry expert, they'll talk to the permitting expert, and they'll put together these reports that then go out to the investor to rely on and be like, oh, this is a good investment. So I think that's one place where there's like really deep benches. Obviously they do a lot more on the engineering and the research and the development and all that other sort of stuff, but I'm just thinking like, we're all liberal arts majors here. So at the other places, I think where it would be interesting is EVs, electric vehicles. There's so much talk about EVs being like a dispatchable fleet. And I think that there's some really cool ideas there. We're far away from that. But like, there's a lot of new interesting stuff. There are a lot of really small startup companies that are doing cool EV stuff, cool charging stations and storage star charging, and like trying to help build the infrastructure for EVs. And that all has to do with storage. I guess you could always go work for ERCOT. They're probably going to put a lot of storage on the grid too. And I think I said
ERCOT's the Texan market.
Oh yeah, ERCOT is
Texas. Yeah.
They had a big winter storm.
A bunch of cowboys.
That was problematic.
I see we have a hand raised. We can probably squeeze in like one quick question if you want to ask it real quick.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Oh, okay, awesome. So this is, just a quick question, but I understand that like the biggest concern as of now is kind of like decreasing fossil fuels and switching more to just electricity. But in terms of like this like solar storage and batteries, like is like are there any like are there going to be any repercussions from switching over to batteries, which can also have like really bad environmental consequences? Or I guess like, is there going to be any kind of waste management done with batteries, I guess, for solar energy? Thank you. Yeah, that's the question.
And are you talking like in their creation, or are you talking in their retirement? Because I think they're maybe a little bit different.
Specifically in their retirement, like after the battery's like just like dead, and like even if it's like rechargeable at a certain point when it just like
Yeah.
becomes just like unusable.
But it's its economic useful life, which is, you know, for batteries 10 or 15 years. Yeah, I mean, there's like been actually a lot of work done in recycling programs, and not like there's been a ton done, I know, for solar panels. And now they're really starting to move into storage systems. So as you're starting to take them down, or as you're like replacing cells, like how do you take care of that management? And it's not super robust, but the market isn't super robust. So I'm thinking like over time, we'll get better at recycling them. But right now we're getting there.
Yeah, I
Thank
would,
you,
you know,
thank you.
I would just add kind of one last word in edgewise is, you know, a lot of it's the energy industry, you get a lot of kind of talking heads and pundits and people sort of, oh, you know, EV is the next, you know, it's the next revolution, and batteries are the next revolution, and hydrogen is the next revolution. I would encourage all of you to be, or fusion, you know, I'd encourage everybody to kind of be a little bit skeptical of anybody kind of promising a quick turnaround. I mean, you know, at least from the electricity side, these are huge kind of industries, and talking billions and billions of dollars changing hands. You know, it's something it's critical infrastructure. It's going to take time for some of these things to happen, more time than I think people realize. You know, again, my personal opinion, I think batteries won't really be a force kind of to deal with until probably 2030 at the earliest. Hydrogen, you know, maybe 15, maybe again 10, 15 years. It's going to take time for these, not necessarily from the technological side, but from the cost competitive side, because the energy markets are also they're very low margin. So you have a lot of competition, and if you don't really have something like an effective carbon price, and it's true that coal is kind of going away and retiring, but a lot of it is being replaced by natural gas, at least kind of in the mid-Atlantic. In the Midwest, because gas has been so inexpensive. So anyway, I would just kind of keep your head kind of screwed on correctly, and yeah, do your research and sort of be healthily skeptical of kind of what you hear. But hopefully these things will mature quickly and start to be important aspects of the energy mix. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ben and Lon, so much for your time. And thank you everyone for being here. As I mentioned, we do have another event next week at the same time, and that's going to be about climate journalism and climate media. So we encourage you to come to that. And yeah, thank you again to our wonderful speakers for hosting this.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Happy to answer anything or give you job advice or that kind of thing.
You can find them both on LinkedIn.
Yeah.